Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today, I have some subscriber-submitted experiences out of that great state of Tennessee. And let me tell you, Tennessee woods definitely holds Dogman, Bigfoot, and some other critters that you don't want to run into, day or night. I also have some very convincing video footage. So before we get into all that, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second if you don't want to miss any of the exciting and informative Twice Daily uploads I put out. Click that bell icon. And finally, last but definitely not least, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and they matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Today's first Tennessee subscriber submitted experience. Jeff, I'm the wife of someone who encountered something at one of the worst possible times in his life. It was April of 1994. We'd just come out of a terrible winter. We had the worst ice storm earlier that year that caused a lot of damage and power outages in the area. Needless to say, by the time April rolled around, my husband was dying to fish. So he and his buddy went fishing in a small creek that leads to a small river. There's always pretty good fishing there. My husband's dad was a commercial fisherman, and this was one of his favorite spots to drop his nets. Anyway, the guys fished until mid-afternoon, and after running the battery down on the trolling motor, they headed back to the truck. Well, when they arrived, who would be waiting on them but my husband's dad? His dad had been wanting to go fishing ever since the weather broke, but during that ice storm he had fallen and broken his hip while tending to the cows. He had told my husband on several occasions, let's go fishing, but for whatever reason, my husband couldn't go. Well, my husband knew what his dad was wanting when they pulled up. He wanted to fish. He told him the battery was dead and it didn't matter. He wanted to take the boat down the creek and said, it'll be all right. No matter what my husband said, trying to talk him out of going, his dad was going, so my husband let him take the boat. You don't refuse a man like his dad. So my husband and his friend left and came home. Fast forward to 9:30 p.m. and we got a call from my husband's mom. Dad hadn't come home. He jumps up and heads back to where he had left his dad beside the creek. He called his buddy that had been fishing with him earlier that day, and they both went to get Dad. When they got to the creek, the boat wasn't there. Everything was as they had left. They started walking down the edge of the creek, yelling for him. They went a mile to the mouth of the creek, where it dumps into the river. It was pitch black, and the flashlights only reached a short distance, when they heard a buzzing sound like an insect, but not like any insect they had ever heard. They stopped and yelled for his dad again. Then they saw on the other side of the river 2 sets of very large red almond-shaped eyes. At first, my husband thought they were deer standing and watching. When they flashed their lights toward the creek, they saw the boat on the far side of that creek. This might be confusing, but the creek meets that small river like a T. The eyes were on the right top of the T, and the boat was at the left bottom of the T. The creek was too deep and wide to cross, and my husband didn't swim well, so they ran back to the road by the truck and crossed the bridge and ran back down to where the boat was. When they got there, the eyes were still on the other side of the river. There, floating by the boat, was his father. They immediately jump into the boat and pull him in, but he's dead. They do CPR, but he is long gone. They grab the paddle and a garden hoe that was in the boat and try to paddle back to the truck. At first, they hadn't realized that the boat wasn't tied off. It was just sitting there. They started to try and paddle, and they kept hitting something under the water, but that cannot be. It's 15 to 20 feet deep where they were. But there they were, hitting something, and it was jerking at the paddle and hoe, like it was trying to pull it from their hands. They were freaked out. They had just found his dad dead, big red eyes, and now something pulling at the paddle. It's a demon, and it's trying to get us too. That's what my husband's friend said. My husband screamed, "Come on, you SOB. You got him, but you're not getting us." My husband's friend was scared and tried to shut my husband up. But my husband told him, "Don't be afraid." Then it all stopped. They were able to get the boat moving. They weren't hitting anything under the water. The paddle and hoe were not being pulled from their hands. On the way back, one of my husband's cousins had showed up on his four-wheeler, so they sent him to go and call rescue. When they finally got to the truck at the bridge, rescue had arrived. After 10 years later, we had a researcher go with us to that spot where it all happened. I had seen something on one of those shows that made me think about the eyes they saw that night. This was the first time my husband had been back since that night. He realized right there and then that the boat had not been tied off, and the creek and river had significant current, that the boat and his dad should have floated downriver, but they didn't. And where the eyes were, it couldn't have been a deer. The eyes were far too large and high off the ground. So what actually happened that night, we will never know, but my husband said if it hadn't been for that buzzing sound, they would have never found the boat or his dad. So did these creatures with the red eyes cause his dad's death? We'll never know. Could they have been watching over him until he was found? We don't know that either. We do know that his dad spent a lot of time in those woods, right there on that creek and river. So, did they know him? He could have known them. Oh, by the way, he was Native American. He wasn't afraid of anything, but respected all of nature. I know this was a very personal story, but it changed my husband forever. He will not fish or hunt anymore. He doesn't want to be in the woods either. I wish I could get my husband back. Thank you for letting me share this experience. There's a little more to it. I actually spoke to the woman and her husband, I do recall. Next email from her. I should have given you more location info in my letter about my husband's encounter. This happened in West Tennessee in a small farming community called Crockett County. On a small creek called Cypress Creek that dumps into a small river called Forked Deer River between Highway 54 and Highway 152. We used to live 1 mile from the creek on 152, and we had lots of scary things like hearing breathing next to the house, just a creepy feeling that you didn't want to be outside after dark. At the time, I didn't know what was going on, but when the X-Files series, there was an episode called The Detour, and a creature in the show had red eyes, and when my husband saw it, he screamed at me and said that is what he saw. Needless to say, that was the last time he watched the X-Files. That got me to researching, and then I found an investigator. I just realized I didn't tell you that the medical examiner ruled his father-in-law's death an accidental drowning. My father's in-law's death an accidental drowning, sorry. There was no outward trauma to the body. I always thought that after healing from the broken hip, when he fell into the water, he could have had a blood clot causing a heart attack. Also, my husband never told anyone except me about what really happened for fear of ridicule. He was a businessman in the neighboring small town, and you all know how rednecks can be. So his friend, himself, and me were the only ones that knew what happened that night. He did give me permission to share this experience. I need to call them and see if they're okay. I got the number right here. I haven't spoken to them. I haven't shared this experience in at least 4 years. A very terrifying encounter. That's something that reminded me a little bit about that encounter that I shared the other day. I believe it was the same day about the same upload that I did with the monks encounter, the Benedictine monk, where the Dogman had run through the woods and stood, looked at the fellas on the boat and jumped, and then submerged itself under the fallen pine tree. It never came up or anything. These creatures do swim. They do swim. They're very skilled climbers, swimmers, runners. Anything we can do as in physical feats, they can do better. They're far more stronger than any human. And they are intelligent. Just because they're a cryptid and look like some sort of dumb animal, they are not a dumb animal. They're a very intelligent, highly skilled apex predator of the woods. That's a very tragic encounter. Not only was there a physical loss, but like she said in her last sentence, or second to last sentence, I just want my husband back. And I remember talking to her. And that night truly changed her husband. Every way possible. He gave up fishing, hunting, going into the woods. And it's really a tragedy. I pray for all of those who do have just these, my encounter was a walk in the park, I guess, compared to his, It's just, I couldn't imagine losing or finding someone that has passed because of tonight's second Tennessee encounter. Jeff, longtime subscriber. I've never shared my experience before, not out of fear of what people think. I'm just lazy at times. My encounter happened when I was younger. I was about 16 in 2006. I grew up in East Tennessee, about an hour east of Knoxville. I grew up target shooting and hunting in the woods behind my grandparents' place. Where we lived was in a foothill of the Appalachian Mountains. The place I hunted was a good friend of the family's farmland. The land butted up to my grandparents' land, so needless to say, I was always over there. The layout of the land is a series of hills and valleys. One side of every hill was clear of trees along with the valley, but the other side of the hills was a mix of hardwood and cedar. So my encounter was one day late winter. I decided to go squirrel hunting just to get out with my dog. My dog was just a black and tan hound mix with who knows what, as I picked her up as a stray. This day was very different than the rest, since normally she would just run all over the place, and if I needed to call her, I would just shoot my .22 and she'd come running. This time, she wouldn't get more than 3 feet away from me before stopping and making sure I was still there. This day was a typical cliche, no sounds of nature. I shrugged it off and kept going, even though I knew that was a sign of a predator in the area. I walked up one hill parallel to the tree line about 5 to 8 feet. I heard something matching my pace with me step for step. I stopped, it stopped. The entire time, my dog was at my feet watching where the sound came from. Now, I've grown up in the outdoors, and I know the difference between something walking on 4 legs and something walking on 2. This thing was definitely walking bipedal, but it was in the cedar thicket, so I couldn't see anything past the tree line. I continued up the hill, listening to this thing more or less stalk me until I got past the thicket. When it stopped, I walked further up and then down into the woods to see if I could look over and see anything, but as it had never left the cedar thicket, I couldn't. I should mention that my dog refused to come into the trees with me. I walked back out of the trees and took the same path down the hill, still 5 to 8 feet off the tree line. As soon as I got to the edge of that cedar thicket, the heavy footsteps started up again, step for step. This entire time, I never felt afraid or dread like many others mention. I was more curious than anything. I wanted to know what this thing was that was stalking me. As it reached the edge of the thicket, there was about 10 yards of open ground and then a 5-strand barbed wire fence that separated the land from our friends. As I reached the end of that tree line, the creature let out a deep, guttural growl that I had felt. I instinctively turned to face where it had come from and backed up until I was against the fence. The creature never came out of the wood line and into view, so I never actually saw it. But I know what bears sound like, as well as wild dog and coyote, and this was neither. The deep sound and the length of time it growled, the lungs on this thing had to have been massive to be able to hold that growl for as long as it did. As I hit that fence, the only thing I could think was I had a single shot bolt action 22 and 10 yards to place a shot. I might as well have had a club. I stood waiting for the worst to happen, to my dog standing her ground next to me. She must have picked up on my body language that I was not going to run. I was going to make a stand after what seemed like an eternity, probably close to 3 minutes. I heard the creature walk away. I wasted no time to hop on that fence and return home. I told no one about what had happened, since I knew they would forbid me from going back hunting ever. Next day I go back, but this time I bring a short-barreled Remington 1100 12-gauge, loaded with buck and slug. When I reached the spot I had walked, I found a kill site of what had to have been more than one rabbit. I knew it was rabbit from the fur and bone. I found they were not there the day before. So, the next part of the upload is probably some of the most realistic or real video evidence I have ever seen in real life, internet, whatever you want to say. The gentleman that has taken these videos has been in Kentucky, in Tennessee, taking videos deep in the woods, and is regarded to be one of the best or better video cryptid researcher out there. I'll share the videos and then we'll talk about them. That video footage was taken by my friend Kirk Stokes. His good friend Paul Chafin as well has been in those same exact areas. Paul has some very compelling photo evidence. I've seen a couple of his videos, but nothing in my eyes touches Kirk's videos. Kirk backed away from the community, which is a shame. I've had him on. I've interviewed him before. And he was mistreated by the community and by a friend of his. A fellow YouTuber, or was a fellow YouTuber and researcher, that at the time, a lot of folks really looked up to this fella, and he treated Kirk quite badly. I'm not going to speak his name because it wouldn't do any matter either way. But it's just crazy that our perception of somebody on the outside, what we see on our screen of somebody, the opinion we have of that person, may not be who that person is off screen. And that's a shame. It's a shame. It's a shame that people hide behind a false kind of face. And they use, they talk about the Bible and prayer and this and that to really pump up that perception that you got of that person. And then I know I was shocked when Kirk told me the story. And I know it's true because I did something for Kirk the week that I interviewed him. And he really, really was just unbelievably gracious. The guy is a phenomenal guy. And I really am, upset that the community back then and certain people back then that he thought were friends took advantage of him. And Kirk knows that he's not going to get taken advantage of here, nor will he be ridiculed for his beliefs on what these creatures are and what they do. I got to get him back on for that werewolf encounter very soon. I think I'll reach out to him maybe a little bit later on this week. Anyway, let's get into some more Tennessee subscriber-submitted encounters. Tonight's third Tennessee subscriber-submitted experience. Hey Jeff, I'm a subscriber and I just got to tell you that you've helped me out more than you could ever imagine. I honestly had no idea that these things existed. I believed in Bigfoot, but not Dogman until last year at the beginning of winter. My buddy has a piece of land that butts up to a 10,000-acre park. It's called East Farm or East Fork, and it's in Jamestown, Tennessee. Here locally, it's known as Glenobi. Me and my best friend Seth have hunted this place for many years. I couldn't even begin to tell you. It's one of them places that makes you feel like someone is watching you all of the time. It's very unsettling. Back before the 1900s, there was a lot of witches and black magic type of junk. I mean, it's very well known as, well, not just a thing a couple of people believe. I mean, everyone knows about it very well. The road going down to this place is a steep decline down a mountain, and about 3/4 of the way down, it takes a left, and you cross a very narrow bridge that leads to a gravel road that goes back into the woods at least 5 miles. Back in the early 70s, a guy hung himself on that bridge. Back before Dogman or werewolf happened, just that alone gave me an uneasy feeling. Eventually I got over it. Me and my buddy got comfortable enough with this place that we'd walk around at night with nothing but a headlamp on the dimmest setting because we didn't want to scare any of the animals away. We were always both armed when we'd go there. I usually took my AR-15, and my friend carries an AR-10 with a night vision scope. We really started carrying these guns after that winter. It was probably 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I was in my buddy's truck with the window up, and my buddy was standing pretty much right there on the driver's side door. I mean, he had one leg out of the vehicle and one leg in. We had a tag along this day. His name was Dylan. He drove his own vehicle down because he wanted to bring his four-wheeler. We was sitting by a cabin, which is on my friend's property, built in the early 1900s. You can really tell how old it is when you walk inside. The doorway is only about 6 feet tall. I don't know how many times I've hit my head on that thing. Anyway, Seth and I are sitting, watching Dylan trying to start his four-wheeler. He probably cranked it 3 or 4 times and it wasn't having it. I guess where it was cold winter evening, it was probably 35 degrees. The time it finally started up right before it died, I shit you not, that if I had to guess, it was a half mile away. It sounded like it was right beside us. It sounded just like in the werewolf movies. Like that, but longer. It went on for, kind of sounded like a man as well, though. It only howled once. It seemed to last for an eternity, but it was 8 to 10 seconds. Seth and I just looked at each other in disbelief and couldn't even speak. Dylan didn't notice it because he was on his four-wheeler and finally had it started up. I've never seen anything, but I lay my hand on a Bible and tell you what sounded like a werewolf definitely was in those woods. Sharing this message, typing it out, literally hurts my stomach. I didn't tell many people because most wouldn't believe us anyway. But that's all right because I've offered to take anyone that doesn't believe me, and yet not one of them has come down with me. I've also heard this about 3 months later, the first thing in the morning like daylight. I do a lot of deer hunting and hog hunting, and Dogman, werewolf, whatever it was, it hollowed at the daytime. Made me kind of think that it was showing me it was its territory. This time it was quite a bit further away. Did say anywhere from, I'd say anywhere from a mile to a mile and a half. I mean, it was the same exact werewolf-like howl. Before all this happened, Seth and I would go down and throw corn and hunt 3 or 4 days out of the week. On the weekend, we normally hunt Saturday night for hog if we're going to hunt at all. We have dramatically slowed down and hardly ever go to the place anymore. Actually, about 2 or 3 months ago, the police found a dead body back there by the river. That should help you know just how desolate this place is. There's no service, not even any power lines, so if anything happened, a person would be pretty much screwed. In that area, just a couple of miles away, a man got a picture of a black panther on his game cam. We don't have to narrate this or anything. If you don't want to, I just wanted to share my experience with you. Thank you for helping me out, Jeff. You're a brother. Yeah, you know, a lot of people don't think my door's going to open. I got to let the cat out. Hang on 1 second. Go on, buddy. A lot of people don't really look at the Black Panther as being a cryptid. I know I kind of do and don't. I really don't, actually. But he's such a little jerk. A lot of cryptozoologists think of the Black Panther as being a cryptid because we're told that it doesn't exist. But that's not... It is and it isn't the definition of a cryptid. I don't consider a Black Panther a cryptid at all. If they are in the area, I think it's probably the most amazing sighting you could have, to see a huge black panther, mountain lion, puma walk in front of you. I mean, I would be amazed. I love cats anyway. I think it'd be amazing to see. Just pray that I'm in a vehicle. Anyway. All right, guys. I always record the morning uploads in the evening. It's getting a little late. I got to get up early. I want to be over at the hospital first thing. They're bringing my dad out of the medically induced coma. The infection is cleared up in the leg. It's going to be a long kind of uphill battle for him, but I think if he follows what the doctors tell him to and not be stubborn, I think he'll be okay. But yeah, I'm kind of beat. I want to get some sleep and be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for the morning. Anyway, guys, thank you for joining me this evening, or this afternoon, letting me share these experiences and these amazing video evidence of Dogman. Kirk Stokes, once again, dynamite video researcher, video capturer. Paul Chafin, photos and videos, they're both great. Kirk's got some amazing stuff. I got to get him on for that werewolf experience that he had. Just a super nice guy. I know you guys liked him on the show. But anyway, enough for rambling, because if I keep talking, I'm just going to probably fall asleep in front of the camera. Anyway, guys, thank you for all your support. I am blessed. So you guys push me to find the truth. Having you guys behind me on my quest for the truth makes that quest that much more, to have a reason to do it that much more. So thank you. Guys, with that, stay safe, happy, healthy, and God bless each and every one of you. Thank you.